Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has filed submissions in the country's highest court, opposing a challenge to his victory by main opposition leader Nelson Chamisa. A lawmaker from the Midwestern state of Minnesota edges closer to becoming the first African refugee elected to the U.S. Congress. And cyclists take on the land of 1,000 hills in the Tour du Rwanda. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidhu Ewart in for Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. We'll have those stories in a moment, but first, Ugandan farmers are joining other farmers across sub-Saharan Africa to develop a method of early detection of the fall armyworm, an invasive pest that originated in the Americas, but since 2016 has devastated crops in Africa. A new mobile application, the Fall Armyworm Monitoring and Early Warning System, may help farmers defeat this destructive pest. Halima Thumani reports from Mukono in Uganda.
The caterpillar is feeding.
The fall armyworm has already caused billions of dollars worth of crop losses in Africa and could cause billions more if not stopped. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and Uganda's Ministry of Agriculture says a new mobile application will help to eradicate the pest.
We must emphasize that is a community monitoring and early warning tool, because the farmer himself must be enabled to do detection and decision making that is equipped with information available to him.
Farmers enter data that the app then uses to calculate infestation levels for appropriate action. Introduced in Madagascar and Zambia, the app is being rolled out across all of sub-Saharan Africa, where the fall armyworm has been found.
When the fall armyworm broke out, it took me a while to recognize it. By the time I knew it was the maize-destroying worm, my whole garden had been ruined. But from what I've learned here today and the trap we've been given to use, I hope to save crops compared to losing them as before.
Stephen Biantwale Tibeijuka is Uganda's Commissioner for Crop Protection.
There are other residual populations that are in other areas feasting on other crops that are fresh are growing. So this is the warning we were talking about, that having a garden of maize that is mature and you are not seeing fall armyworm does not mean the fall armyworm is not there.
The data farmers collect on the fall armyworm goes to a global web-based platform for analysis on ways to one day exterminate the invasive pest. Halima Thumani for VOA News, Mukono, Uganda.
We have sad news to report from Sudan. At least 22 primary school children drowned on Wednesday when a boat carrying more than 40 people sank while crossing the Nile River in northern Sudan. The state news agency SUNA says civil defense forces were searching the waters for the bodies of the missing children. A female hospital employee also drowned. The news agency reports indicate the boat's engine failed in a high current while it was crossing the river to a school in Kabna, a small village in northern Sudan. The woman was identified as a hospital employee in the village. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has filed submissions in the country's highest court, opposing a court challenge to his victory by main opposition leader Nelson Chamisa. Chamisa, who was the main political rival from the opposition party Movement for Democratic Change, has repeatedly said the July 30th vote was rigged and challenged the result, which gave Mnangagwa 2.46 million votes versus 2.15 million votes for him. The country's constitutional court has 14 days to make a ruling which will be final and paves the way for either a new election or the inauguration of the current president, Emmerson Mnangagwa. Soon after filing the case on Wednesday, ZANU-PF Secretary for Legal Affairs, Paul Mangwana, addressed the media.
We have successfully filed our opposition papers to this application, which we think is just a waste of time, but that's for the court to decide. The next step will be for the MDC Alliance to file an answering affidavit to our papers, and then from there, the court will set down the matter for hearing.
our team of legal practitioners is ready to meet the MDC Alliance in court.
6 people were killed in an army crackdown on opposition protests after the vote. The first since longtime leader Robert Mugabe was forced to resign following a de facto coup last November. Malian President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta is claiming victory in Sunday's runoff elections. His spokesman said Tuesday Keïta comfortably won the re-election, dismissing claims from the opposition that they won. The runoff was between Keïta, who is seeking a second term to rule the West African gold and cotton producing country, against opposition leader Soumaïla Cissé, who said on Monday that the vote was fraudulent and that he was victor. Cissé has not provided concrete evidence for his accusations, and Keïta has denied any wrongdoing. Voter turnout was low, and the poll was marred by violence from militants that shut nearly 500 polling stations of the total. Government sources say official results are expected on Thursday. Nigeria's acting president is ordering the overhaul of a police unit following allegations of human rights violations. As the government seeks to polish its security record ahead of February's presidential election, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo is acting as head of state, while President Muhammadu Buhari, who plans to run for re-election, takes a 10-day holiday in Britain. Osinbajo instructed the head of the Nigeria Police Force to reform the Special Anti-Robbery Squad and ordered an independent investigation after persistent complaints and reports on the allegations of human rights violations. The unit responsible for tackling serious crimes such as armed robbery, kidnapping, and cattle rustling has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing. Following Osinbajo's instruction, NPF Chief Inspector General Ibrahim Idris ordered the immediate overhauling of the unit, including changing the name of the unit to the Federal Special Anti-Robbery Squad. In U.S. political news, Minnesota state lawmaker 35-year-old Ilhan Omar is one step closer to making history as the first refugee from the African continent and the second Muslim American woman elected to the U.S. Congress. She is seeking to replace Keith Ellison, the first Muslim American in the body, who currently represents the liberal Minneapolis district that favors Democrats. As VOA's Ken Farabaugh reports, those supporting Omar ultimately hope she influences the passionate debate over U.S. immigration and foreign policy.
The foundation of Ilhan Omar's historic primary election win to represent Minnesota's 5th district in the U.S. Congress was built on a simple message.
I am a millennial with student debt, I'm a refugee, and a renter.
Meaning she understands the younger liberal voters that make up a large part of her congressional district. It was a winning message in 2018 and 2 years ago, when she won her first election to the state legislature.
Before Ilhan, I think a lot of us didn't know what type of government we had. But now, since she was elected, a lot of us started paying attention.
Khalid Mohammed agrees with Omar's goals to increase the federal minimum wage and reduce student debt. He was one of the thousands of Somali Americans that came out to vote on a primary election day with high turnout. But the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs Professor Larry Jacobs says Somali American votes are only part of Ilhan's success story.
But that is not enough to prevail in a district in which Somalis really numerically are not a large number, and in this race we're split with another Somali candidate. What Omar has been able to do is build a broad coalition that includes progressives who agree with her kind of Bernie Sanders light agenda, and people who believe that it's time for the Democratic Party to become more diverse and to welcome in new voices.
New voices that have new and old challenges to face.
I am well equipped to organize against an administration that is using the politics of fear.
Omar, who is the Democrats' assistant minority leader in the Minnesota House of Representatives, is against family separations at the border and is a critic of the Trump administration's so-called Muslim ban.
History will look upon this action with deep regret and shame.
Khalid Mohammed hopes Omar's personal experience will eventually influence the debate in Congress over U.S. immigration policy.
As a refugee, she had experienced the struggles of being a refugee and the vetting process, and something that's Donald Trump not understood quite well.
Mohammed also hopes Omar's election sends a message not just to a larger religious community, but an entire continent.
For her to be the first African-born congresswoman, I think it's a big deal in the continent. It sends a message to everyone from Africa that, I mean, you might be a refugee, you might came here as an immigrant, but you have rights and you can be whoever you want as long as you put the work in.
I congratulate you.
Work that begins for Omar after a November general election that she is also likely to win, as the district she seeks to represent heavily favors Democratic candidates. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook. So check us out and share our show with your friends. Still ahead on Africa 54. Could one of Africa's most grueling cycle races challenge the Tour de France? But first, a look at Wednesday's headlines. We have an update on that Italian bridge collapse. Authorities are saying Wednesday that at least 37 people died when the bridge failed in Genoa. A motorist captured a large section of the Morandi Bridge falling Tuesday during a violent storm, sending some cars plunging 45 meters. Rescuers are continuing to search through the rubble and using dogs to try to look for additional victims while investigators try to determine the cause of the collapse. A fire official says 7 people were pulled out of the wreckage alive on Tuesday. The decades-old bridge connecting 2 major highways between Italy and France has been in gradual deterioration. Authorities, however, have not said what caused the bridge span to come down. British police are investigating several addresses in Birmingham and Nottingham in connection with a suspected terror attack near the Houses of Parliament Tuesday in London. A 29-year-old man was arrested after driving a silver Ford Fiesta into a crowd of pedestrians and bike riders, causing injuries before he ran into a barrier. Police have identified the man as Salih Khatar, a British citizen of Sudanese origin, but not a London resident. He is VOA's Latza Hoke.
If the goal was to terrorize Londoners, the Tuesday crash has not served its purpose. Commuters interviewed near the site of the incident in Westminster said life will continue as usual.
People are busy doing things, so I think London will stay together, but we'll just carry on doing what it's doing.
7:30 in the morning, you don't think something like that's going to happen, but like I said, a road traffic accident anywhere at 7:30 in the morning could happen.
You can't tell where the threat is coming from, but I just think that means that people have to carry on with their lives.
The motive of the suspected terror attack was not immediately clear, as the driver refused to cooperate with police. An eyewitness told reporters at the scene that the car was driving fast and did not slow down before hitting the security barrier outside the Parliament building.
He didn't swerve, there was not another car going behind him. It looked like it was planned by He looked like he knew what he's doing.
London Mayor Sadiq Khan informed residents and visitors that the authorities are taking additional measures to protect them.
Over the course of today and the next few days, Londoners will see and tourists will see more armed police officers, more unarmed police officers. They shouldn't be scared by that. They should remain calm and vigilant.
British officials have thanked the police and emergency services for a prompt response.
It's a reminder to us all that the work that they do day in, day out to keep us safe.
Home Secretary Sajid Javid praised residents of London for their resilience and determination to not allow those who would exploit these types of incidents to divide them. U.S. President Donald Trump reacted in a tweet calling for toughness and strength in dealing with the perpetrators. Zlarica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
A deadly airstrike by a Saudi-led coalition killed at least 40 children in northern Yemen last week, prompting international outrage. The U.S. State Department has called on the coalition of Gulf Arab states to investigate the incident, one of the deadliest in the three-year-old war. The United Nations Security Council is also calling for a credible, transparent investigation. VOA's Cindy Sain reports from the State Department.
These children were on their way back from a summer school picnic when their bus was struck by a missile in Saada, Yemen. At least 50 people were killed, most of them children. Another 77 people were injured. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert said the U.S. takes all credible accounts of civilian casualties seriously.
We have called for a Saudi-led coalition to investigate the civilian casualties that took place as a result of that airstrike. Secretary Mattis has spoken about this. The Secretary dispatched a three-star general to Saudi Arabia to discuss the incident with the Saudi government and encourage them to look into the situation.
Nauert confirmed that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo spoke with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on the phone about the incident, but declined to provide details. Analysts say this is not the first time innocent people have been killed in Yemen in an errant Saudi airstrike. The conflict began when Iranian-backed Houthi rebels seized the Yemeni capital of Sana'a in 2014. Aaron David Miller spoke to VOA.
The fact is, you can't operate this way and expect to win this war. You can't even expect, and the assault against Hudaydah confirms it, to use military pressure in order to push the Houthis to the table. That isn't working either. And the U.S. is enabling this.
The UN Security Council has called for a credible and transparent investigation of the airstrike.
What we want to see is a stop to the fighting. What we want to see is a stop to the humanitarian suffering. What we want to see is a halt to civilian casualties, which continue in what is a man-made humanitarian crisis.
UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said parties to the conflict have been invited to sit down and talk with each other in Geneva on September 6, under the mediation of the Special Envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths. Cindy Sain, VOA News, the State Department.
Now, how do you know if a piece of art is real or fake? Well, you ask a scientist. At New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art, chemistry, physics, and geology are all playing a part in the detective work of determining whether a work of art is an original or a forgery. Now, teens are learning the tricks of that trade too. Here's VOA's Tina Trin.
A conversation with scientist Marco Leona could have you reaching for the nearest dictionary.
We have X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, Raman spectroscopy, optical absorption spectroscopy.
But Leona and his colleagues at the Metropolitan Museum of Art are happy to explain their work, especially to the young people gathered here for the Teens Take the Met event.
We're opening a window on the work that we do behind the scenes of the Met to study and conserve works of art.
And these teens are learning that science and art aren't mutually exclusive subjects.
My research focuses on studying a blue pigment that we don't really
understand as yet. And so by looking at this chemistry, we can start to understand how it was used in an archaeological context.
We're using every scientific technique to essentially ask the question, when you're faced with a work of art, what is this and how did it get here?
Another question for these art detectives: is it real or fake? X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy is one way to find out.
You shoot a very fine X-ray beam onto the object, and the object responds by emitting other X-rays. So we can tell, is there lead, is there titanium, is there mercury?
Identifying these elements gives researchers clues to an artwork's origins, and the portability of today's equipment means the technology is no longer confined to a lab.
That's extremely empowering, and it's a quantum leap in what we can do.
The hands-on experience will hopefully inspire the next generation of scientists.
I want to create my own biotech company and hopefully expand that into creating more hospitals and improving healthcare in Africa.
Combining science and art at the largest art museum in America? Some might call it a stroke of genius. Tina Trin, VOA News, New York.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Promoting clean energy and battling rising fuel prices, 9 students at an Egyptian university have managed to design an air-powered vehicle, which they say costs nearly nothing to move. The Helwan University students researched the possibility of a theory which sees regular compressed air as a means to operate vehicle motors. The vehicle now has a top speed of 40 kilometers per hour and could drive for 30 kilometers before the fuel is depleted. The overall cost reached around $1,000. Egypt has committed to deep cuts to energy subsidies and other tough fiscal measures as part of an IMF loan program which began in 2016 that caused energy prices to soar. Meanwhile, in high-tech news, an Associated Press investigation found that many Google services on Android devices and iPhones store your location data even if you've used a privacy setting that says it will prevent Google from doing so. For the most part, Google is upfront about asking permission to use your location information. An app like Google Maps will remind you to allow access to location if you use it for navigating. Storing your minute-by-minute travels carries privacy risks, so the company will let you pause a setting called location history, but some Google apps automatically store time-stamped location data without asking. And finally, the United States hasn't sent astronauts to space from American soil in years, but as early as next spring, they will be back at it, and they will be traveling in days. South African-born billionaire Elon Musk's aerospace company SpaceX has unveiled the Crew Dragon, the spacecraft designed to send these men into space and back. Earlier this month, NASA announced 9 astronauts, part of the first manned space missions launched from America since going private for space transport. In 2014, SpaceX and Boeing received multi-billion-dollar contracts from NASA to develop so-called space taxis that would ferry astronauts to and from the space station. Both companies are scheduled for unmanned flight tests later this year, and that's what's trending today. Now, tourism is the biggest foreign exchange earner for the Central African nation of Rwanda, but the country is also garnering international attention and making its mark on the continent for cycling. Organizers of Tour du Rwanda say they want to promote its Hilly race, one of Africa's most grueling cycling routes, alongside well-known international circuits like Tour de France and Giro d'Italia. Cyclist Samuel Mugisha clinched victory in the Tour du Rwanda on August 12th with a punishing cobblestone climb known as the Wall of Kigali. That earned the 20-year-old $2,000 in prize money and made him the youngest winner of the contest that Rwanda hopes will put it on the global professional cycling map.
Yeah, it was my dream to win the Tour of Rwanda, but I don't stop to work hard. It showed me how strong I am, but I win this, but I think for next year.
Neighbors Ethiopia and Kenya have produced scores of long-distance runners who regularly dominate the world's top athletics contests. Rwanda wants its tour and band of riders to make its name in another endurance sport. Local competitors have now won the Tour du Rwanda 5 consecutive years, beating a growing roster of international challengers. This time, cyclists from a dozen other countries, including France, South Africa, and the United States, rode through the land of 1,000 hills, cheered on through the towns and farms by large crowds. Cyclist Phil Sutherland participated in this year's race.
They say the land of 1,000 hills, but it's really 1,000 mountains. And the riders here, they don't yet have the speed and power on the flats, but when they go uphill, they go faster, as fast as some of the best World Tour riders. So it's a different type of racing here, but I'd say the biggest difference is the fans. There's fans lined for every kilometer of the entire course, just saying, go, 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 and it's great to see the enthusiasm this country has for the sport of cycling.
The Rwandan government says it plans to push the sport further by sponsoring the 8-stage tour, now in its 10th year, and by exempting imported professional bicycles from taxes. One goal is to get its riders into the Tour de France, the pinnacle of competitive cycling. Aimabo Bayingana is president of Rwanda Cycling Federation.
We are among the 5 top countries in cycling in Africa. My hope is that Rwandan riders continue to perform, then to race in international big races like Tour de France, Vuelta d'Espagne or Giro d'Italia.
According to the race results, 60 riders finished the race. Among them was cyclist Skonejazi Kiboyi.
This country is called hilly world. There's no flat stage. Every day, you climb, you descend, you climb, you descend hard. So it's really hard. Every day it's really hard. It's wearing people out every day.
Organizers say next year's Tour du Rwanda will be upgraded by professional cycling governing body UCI to the 2.1 road race category, enabling it to host even more international competitors. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune into VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.
Welcome to English in a Minute. You know the difference between a left foot and a right foot. But what does it mean if you say someone has
2 left feet?
Maybe our 2 friends, Anna and Jonathan, can help us?
Jonathan, what happened to your head?
Well, I've been taking these dance lessons with my new friend.
Were you dancing on your head?